When you're a child, a rainstorm can feel much bigger than it really is. On that day, the rain felt endless, and I felt smaller than ever. I must have been 9 years old, or maybe 10. The sky stayed dark from afternoon, and heavy clouds blocked the sun for the entire day. I came back from school and came home. Inside, the house felt cold and damp. My parents had left early that morning, so I was all alone. They'd gone out of the city to manage an exhibition and planned to return late at night. My mom had prepared pasta for the lunch. It was my favorite dish. They called me on the old landline phone. I could hear worry in their voices. They told me that the roads were unsafe for travel due to heavy rain. They told me they were stuck in a motel and wouldn't be back until the storm passed. My mother's voice came through like a soft hug. She told me to stay calm and promised she'd come home as soon as she could. My father asked his sister to come watch me, but she said a big tree branch had fallen on her car. My mother stayed on the line for over an hour, telling me stories about when I was little. She made me laugh, and bit by bit I felt a little braver.
Yes, parents have a superpower of doing this.
Before she hung up, my mother reminded me to lock the front door, close the windows, and pull the curtains. After the call ended, the house felt very quiet. The rain still beat on the roof, but inside it was oddly still. At night, I grabbed some candy and snacks from the kitchen and sat on the couch in the living room. To keep my mind busy, I pulled out my handheld water game, the one with tiny rings floating in water, and tried to land the rings on the pegs. The game made soft beeps when I succeeded. I munched on candy, my fingers sticky, and stared at the clock ticking. I don't know how long I played before I drifted off. My water game slipped from my hand and on the floor. I woke only when a huge clap of thunder shook the house, and a bright flash of lightning lit up the room. It was almost 2 in the night. For a brief moment, the lightning also lit up the door to a room right in front of me. I was sure it was closed the entire day. Startled, I sat up and remembered my mother's last words. I hurried to the curtains, pulled them aside just enough to check the door, then closed them again. I did every step, though my hands were shaking due to the sound of thunderstorm. I pushed the bolt, checked each window latch, and tugged the curtains until the living room was dark. And then I lit up one light of the living room.
I think someone was already inside when you locked the house.
I did not think about that at that time. I was only a kid. Back on the couch, I wrapped my arms around my knees. The rain was still loud, but this time something else joined it. A soft creak from upstairs. At first, I thought it was the wind or the house settling. Then I heard it again, heavy, slow steps on the stairs. My chest tightened. I wanted to run upstairs to see, but I couldn't move. At first I turned toward the other room, but then I remembered that I had seen it unlocked just now, so instead, I bolted toward the kitchen and squeezed into the cabinet under the sink. The wooden door slammed behind me, and I sat in the dark with my heart hammering. Inside that small space, it smelled like soap and old pots. My knees pressed against my chest, and my hands felt cleaning bottles and sponges. The space was too tight, and even a little movement could have opened the cabinet door. I had to keep myself completely still. There was only a thin line of light slipped in under the cabinet door. Above me I heard slow steps on the wooden floor, then the creak of stairs as someone came down. I closed my eyes and held my breath, listening as the steps moved closer to the kitchen. I peeked under the door and saw a pair of boots covered in thick, wet mud. They looked heavy and old. The person moved toward the front door. I couldn't see their face, just the dirty shoes as they walked away. Suddenly the phone rang, loud and sharp in the house. I heard the footsteps stopped, and I held so still I thought I might burst. After several rings from the phone, I heard the front door open and close. The muddy boots walked out of the house, I thought. I stayed in that cabinet, frozen, The phone must have rang for quite a few times, but I could not get the courage to walk out of the cabinet. The storm slowly began to quiet. When the rain turned from a roar to soft pats on the roof, I crept out and looked around. Morning light peeked under the curtains. I pushed the cabinet door open and stepped into the living room. The carpet was streaked with muddy footprints from the staircase toward the door before ending. No one stood there now, just those wet tracks. I ran back to the front door and locked it again, my hands shaking. I sat down on the floor, pressing my back to the cool wood, and waited. After a couple of hours, I heard a car pull up outside. My parents were home. My mother rushed in alarmed and found me curled on the floor. She dropped her bags, scooped me into her arms, and hugged me tight. I told her about the rain, the steps, and the muddy boots. My father knelt by the prints on the floor. He touched the dried mud and frowned. He checked every lock and window. Then he went upstairs to look in all the rooms and closets. He called out to see if anyone was hiding but found no one. After that night, my parents never left me alone at home again. If they had to go out, they took me with them or asked a friend to stay. I didn't tell anyone else about that night for years, but the memory stayed with me. It was my childhood trauma. Even now, I check the locks twice, maybe 3 times, and I remember how it felt to be a child, alone in a storm. It was close to midnight when I closed the gas station. Rain had been falling since early evening. Not heavy, just steady. The kind that beads on your jacket and never lets you dry. I was covering the late shift for a coworker. The place was quiet. Just me, the humming coolers, and the occasional splash of cars driving through puddles on the nearby highway. The only strange part was the last customer, a woman, soaked from head to toe, hood pulled over her eyes. She came in without a word, grabbed a bottle of water, and set it on the counter. Raindrops trailed from her sleeves and pooled on the floor. I asked if she was okay. She looked up and gave me this strange smile. Too wide, too practiced. Her eyes didn't match it. She paid in crumpled bills, then turned and walked back into the rain without saying a thing. 15 minutes later, I locked up, stepped into the downpour, and started the 40-minute drive home through the forest. The road home is narrow, lined with thick pine woods, and in that rain, visibility was a joke. My wipers swiped nonstop, and my high beams barely made a dent in the fog. Halfway home, I saw blinking warning lights through the fog. The car was parked on the side of the road. The driver's door was wide open, and its red lights were shining on the wet road. No one was inside. I slowed but didn't stop. Just the sight of it gave me a bad feeling, like something was waiting, just out of view. A few miles later, my phone buzzed. A motion alert from my home security app. I tapped the notification. A still image showed someone standing at my front door. A woman, drenched, hood up.
Is that the same woman? She got there before you, in that storm.
I drove into the backyard behind my house. My headlights lit up the fog, and the rain hit the windshield hard like a curtain of water. I parked beside the shed and just sat there, listening to the engine make soft clicking. I watched the rain make the trees in the distance look blurry. I live alone, a one-story place in the woods. Quiet, normally peaceful. Tonight, it felt exposed. Before I got out, I opened the security app and tapped the feed from the gate camera, the one watching the path leading to the front door. The footage was still recorded from earlier. I scrubbed back. At 12:27 in the night, the timestamp showed her, standing just outside the gate, rain streaming down her hood, motionless. She didn't open it. She just knocked 3 times and walked away out of frame. I checked the most recent feed. Nothing there now. Just rain. Eyes flicking between the trees in the front of the house. The porch light flickered weakly in the rain, casting long shadows across the siding. No one was there. I unlocked the door, locked it again behind me. slid the deadbolt, dropped the chain. The storm outside made it feel like the whole house was holding its breath.
That knock, I think she'll come back.
I was a bit afraid, and I didn't want it to sleep either. I sat on the floor with the lights off, watching the feed. Nothing. Just rain fog, and the occasional flicker from the porch light. For those nights, I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I moved to the floor in the hallway, closer to the front door, just in case. Hours passed, and now I was feeling sleepy. The rain outside never stopped. It tapped against the window like fingers. I left the lamp on and finally drifted off for a few hours. When I woke up, it was still raining. A dull, gray morning. The air smelled like wet concrete and pine needles. I checked the camera's cloud archive. She'd been there 3 times that night. First at 12:27 a.m., just after I saw that empty car on the roadside. Then again at 2:13, and once more at 3:51. Each time she knocked. 3 times she stood there silently for a moment and walked away into the rain. No reaction. No signs of being lost. I called the police. They came out, took a report. She hadn't broken any laws. Unless she entered the home, there wasn't much they could do. I asked if they'd drive past the gas station. Maybe she was still nearby. They called me back that afternoon. It was about that abandoned car I passed. They said it had been reported stolen 2 days earlier. After the police report, things were quiet. For a while. A week later, I got sick. Just a cold, probably. But it hit hard. Fever, chills. I stayed home from work, half asleep on the couch. It was late afternoon. It was not raining that day. I was watching an old movie, drifting in and out of sleep, when my phone buzzed. Motion alert. I sat up. Tapped the feed. She was back, hood up, soaked to the bone. Even though it was not raining. She was standing just outside the frame of the camera. Then she stepped forward and grabbed the doorknob.
She thought no one was home.
She raised one hand, fingers splayed, not to knock this time, but to press her palm against the door. I watched her breathe, slow, shallow, like she was listening, and then her head tilted toward the camera, as if she knew I was watching. She then rattled the handle, paused, then pushed harder. Tried to force the door open. I didn't move. I just watched her through the camera, heart pounding, breath frozen. Then I stood, quiet as I could. Took 2 steps toward the door. She stopped, her head turned, just slightly, like she sensed me on the other side. Then she bolted. No hesitation. She ran off the porch, down the steps, and into the woods behind the home, vanishing into the trees, and missed like she'd never been there. I called the police again. They showed up, searched the area, and found a few cars deep in the woods, but they did not find the woman. But that morning, I stepped outside and found something under my doormat, a piece of paper. No message. Just a drawing, 3 small black dots, side by side, like knock, knock, knock. The paper was dry. Everything else was soaked. It started with a knock during the worst storm of the year. But what followed wasn't human. I was 28 when I moved into my first apartment on the edge of the city. It was an older building, but perfect for me. Quiet, secluded, and the rent was affordable. A far cry from the chaotic roommate situations I'd been in before. For 2 months, everything was peaceful. I would get home from work, feed my dog Max, and then relax on the couch, listening to the sounds of the city fading into the background. The rain was soothing, pouring down in a soft, rhythmic pattern. It felt like it would never stop, and I liked it that way. It started one night in the middle of a relentless rainstorm. The heavy downpour made the air thick and damp. It was around 9 p.m., and I had just finished dinner. Max had been acting strange, pacing near the door, looking out the window. I didn't think much of it at first. He was a nervous dog, always barking at shadows or anything that moved outside in the rain. But then, he started whimpering. It was unlike him. I called him over, but he just stood there, staring at the window with wide eyes. I got up and went to check on him, thinking he might have seen a squirrel or another dog outside. But when I looked out, I saw nothing but the rain pounding down, blurring everything beyond the window. I brushed it off and went back to the couch. Max followed me, but he didn't settle down. He kept walking in circles, his paws clicking against the hardwood floor, his eyes darting nervously. The rain outside was deafening, but Max seemed to hear something beyond it. Around 10 p.m., I heard 3 knocks. Not soft, loud, like someone was pounding with their elbow.
Who knocked during a rainstorm?
I wasn't expecting anyone, but maybe it was a delivery or a neighbor. I opened the peephole, but no one was there. I checked the hallway, but it was empty. No footsteps. No signs of life. Just the sound of the rain, falling heavily on the pavement outside. I closed the door and locked it, trying to shake the growing unease in my chest. But then, the doorbell rang again. It wasn't just a simple ring. I stepped back from the door and looked at Max. He was standing still, staring at the window again. His ears were flattened against his head, his eyes wide with fear. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I slowly walked to the window, my heart racing in my chest. And then I saw him. A figure, standing in the pouring rain just outside the window. He was facing away from me, but I could see the outline of his coat flapping in the wind. His head tilted slightly as though he was listening, his figure standing still while the storm raged around him. I froze. I had no idea who he was, and the idea that someone was outside my window at this time, in the storm, with no reason to be there, sent a chill through me. I backed away from the window, my breath quick and shallow. Max was still on edge, pacing back and forth, his low growl vibrating through the apartment. I waited. It was raining continuously and harder, as though the storm itself was intensifying with every second. The man didn't move. He was just standing there, his back toward my apartment. I thought maybe he was waiting, but there was no building or anything in the way he was looking. And then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and looked toward my apartment for a few seconds and walked away. It was as if the storm was still around, but he moved through it like it wasn't even there. I went to sleep later that night. Max stayed close to me. The next day, I called the landlord. I wanted to know if anyone else had seen the man, but he assured me the building was secure. No strange reports, no weird behavior from neighbors. For the next few days, it didn't rain. Then a few nights later, the storm returned. The same deafening downpour. I got back home, and usually Max would come out when he hears me home, but that day he did not. I called him, but no response. I looked everywhere in my apartment, but he had vanished. Right when I was looking for him, the knock came again. Same loud knock, as if someone was pounding with their elbow, followed by the doorbell. I froze. I didn't want to open the door, but I couldn't just ignore it. I looked through the peephole, but there was nothing. I was furious and decided to run toward the gate and see if someone was close by. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Max right outside the door.
How'd he go out with the door locked?
I didn't understand that either, and he couldn't have knocked with his elbow, and the doorbell was on a height, and there is no way Max could have reached it. And another question is, how would he ring it? Max was literally soaking wet, like he'd been dragged through water. I picked him, hugged while he was shivering. I fed him and gave him a warm towel. He slept right after eating. The next day, he woke me up early, and I froze when I noticed there was a locket he was now wearing. Shiny, silver, clamped around his collar. I'd never seen it before. I opened the locket, and there was a folded paper inside. I unfolded the paper, and there was this handwritten note saying, "Dogs can't ring doorbells." It sent shiver down my spine. Someone had taken my dog and then returned. I immediately called the landlord and insisted that he check the security cameras. He checked and found the footage of this guy standing there for almost an hour, but he did not do anything. He just stood there and never entered the apartment. I was asking myself then, who rang my apartment's bell? Their face was never visible on screen due to heavy rain and their hood.